This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post. Brought to you by the Fort Hall School of Government, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 5th of February 2020 and I am 2J.
I am Tom.
And I am JM. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Standard, man who changed Kenya. In the Daily Nation, the last imperial president.
Yes.
And in the Star, Moi's 4-month fight for his life in hospital.
Yes.
So this comes following the news of Moi's death yesterday in the morning at 5 a.m. And we can take these headlines together.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
So what do we have to say about Moi?
You know, JM, reading Twitter and social media yesterday, I got a little bit disappointed with Kenyans. And largely, maybe they know their history, maybe they don't. But I want to come to Moi's defense.
Okay.
All right? And they've called Moi a dictator. And they've said this is a man who oversaw Kenya's plunder. And I say, all right, fair enough, but there's a reason why. The reason is, one, political, second is economic. But let me go political first. For a man who had been aggressed by the Kikuyu elite all the way from when Jomo was president, for probably about 7 years since Jomo was president, until probably 3-4 years after Moi himself was president. There's no way you can blame this man because he faced a lot of aggression.
He was a man under siege from GEMA hegemony. And so we have to understand him. What you're saying is we have to understand him in that context.
In that context.
All the decisions he made.
He was slapped, for goodness sake, by a PPO somewhere in Nakuru. They used to, he enters cabinet meetings, they speak in Kikuyu, right? Charles Jonjo, it is said, even when he was AG and Moi was VP, he used to say, Moi, come here, and Moi comes running down very fast. You know,
a little fun fact, there were as few as 800 Kalenjins in Nairobi
I mean,
when Moi became president in 1978. And furthermore, there were even fewer in positions of parastatal, senior positions in public sector and private sector that he could depend on. So he was really surrounded by all these GEMA, the GEMA community, the Luo nation, and other people who had really thrived under the
However, does that justify everything that transpired thereafter during his tenure?
There's no justification. But what I'm saying is, what Moi did was, I am not saying what he did was right, but
it was understandable.
It was understandable.
Given his circumstances.
Yes. Let's look at it this way. How many factors of production do we know? One, you have capital. Second is land. Third is labor. Now, Moi sat down and he said, the Kenyatta elite or members of GEMA who were around Kenyatta, they must have given themselves one thing. And they were taught by the Muzungu how to do it. Yes, it was privilege. And they did it in such a sophisticated way.
To land.
So they swallowed up one of the factors of production.
They swallowed one of the factors of production in such a sophisticated way. Now, the GEMA elite were much more than the Kalenjin elite. When the Kalenjin elite came to power, they ate with their mouths open. But it's because they actually mimicked the Kenyatta the Kenyatta power circle as how they actually accumulated land. And the Moi elite said, okay, you guys are done with land, we will now move to capital.
What I'm hearing you say is monkey see, monkey do.
It was monkey see, monkey do.
But is that a good thing?
No, but one, I'm not saying it is good.
The people on Twitter, Kenyans on Twitter are not without a reason.
I am not saying it is good. But look, if you have to blame Moi, you have to blame other people.
Okay.
2J, there's something you would tell us about Moi's colored legacy.
Exactly, and I think that it brings into, I think we should consider another headline that we don't have on the table right now, but the Business Daily, their special edition was the colored legacy, which to me, I think is completely apt. Yes, I think these are other great headlines, but I think that to me speaks to the difficulty with the legacies of our leaders. Right? You look at Mugabe, after he died, that's what they spoke about, this man with a complicated legacy. Even Kofi Annan, he had a very complicated legacy. A lot of American presidents had the same. So I think for us to just look at it like the man who changed Kenya, the last imperial president, I think that we're really looking at it through one lens. We're not considering the entire story.
And I have the final one. I have a final...
The final thought.
I have a final reason. I have a final reason. When Moi decided to become a monster, as people have said he was, it was in the context of the coups that were happening around the region and around that time. Uganda was in turmoil. For goodness sake, Somalia was in turmoil.
What do you do?
Tanzania was in turmoil. You know, if you look across the region, every president was being deposed like it was a hobby.
And now that you mentioned the coup, I've got to narrate this story once again from Morton's book. And he says, you know, not that he says, but in my view, he's a perfect example of a leader who embodied the principles of the Tower of Paradox. So according to Morton, Moi knew about the coup. So Morton says, in late July 1982, when he was making preparations to fly to Tripoli to hand over the chairmanship of the OAU to Gaddafi, NSIS told him, Mzee, don't go, there's a plot to overthrow you. And so he chose not to go. And so, you know, he must have assessed the threat level. And he must have wanted the crisis to happen so that he could finally kick into Machiavellian mode and fix all the people that he needed to fix. And shortly thereafter, he fixed Gigi Karaoke. He fixed Charles Njondro.
JJ Kamobo.
And, you know, a whole bunch of other people. And I've got to remind you of what the Tower of Paradox says. It's beautiful. It says, amongst other things, when able, appear unable. When angry, appear to submit. Attack when the opponent is unprepared and appear where least expected. And that is, Moi was faithful to that. During his years as vice president, and even his years into the presidency. Completely an underestimated person.
And I think what you're saying speaks really well to what the Daily Nation has captured. The last imperial president, good man, dirty game. And I know, I think that's what we know about politics. It's a dirty game.
And as you can see, it's not personal. It was just business.
I must before we move on, okay, let me give the criteria that we use to judge the headlines. Are they topical or speculative? Repetitive or groundbreaking? And finally, thoughtful or just plain lazy?
Can we just toss the star?
I think we just toss the star
instantly.
outright.
I think they have had such a good opportunity to really capture the legacy of this man. And what did they do? Moi's 4-month fight for his life.
But once again, no justice done.
But you forget the star probably has a new owner.
So I think we give it to the nation.
I think so as well.
The picture is great, giving us Moi in his younger days.
It's
brilliant. Show it.
This should be on all your walls, even the ones that don't like him. Just look at this.
Yeah, because I think it does capture that difficulty in explaining his legacy, the complications.
Perfect.
And so with that, we toss the standard.
And now on to the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. We also have a 3-part criteria that we use to judge them. Are the cartoons humorous or dry, satirical, pessimistic, and are they effective or plain lazy?
Honestly,
what do we have?
I think we can look at all three together. So they're all the same.
They're all the same.
The same idea.
Same theme, absolutely.
Yes.
All right. Why don't you start with Gado in
this
Victor Ndula.
Yes. Victor Ndula is a drawing caricature of Daniel Arap Moi, and I think it's R.I.P. Moi, and the I is...
is that what it is?
Yes, R.I.P. Moi, and he's put the I as Moi himself. It's beautiful. It's beautiful, 1924 to 1920. And I think he should be given his respects.
Again, in the standard, Gado, we have the same thing. Moi again, he says Daniel Torotich Arap Moi, 1924 to 1920.
Yes.
And finally, I think the most interesting one, Celeste in the Star draws the same idea, Moi. It says, fare thee well, His Excellency Daniel Arap Moi, second president of the Republic of Kenya. But this time he's holding, his hand is an iron fist. Which I think is quite apt.
It's a very good innovation.
Also very subtle, eh?
Yes, it is subtle. I think that's the point now.
It's very, very subtle.
Absolutely. So Moi had this character. He would project an image of somebody who was peace-loving, somebody who was gracious and merciful. But yet he really did rule with the iron fist. So it's brilliant, and the subtlety really, really good. I must say one more thing before we award our cartoon about the Kenyans on social media who are behaving dishonorably towards our beloved Mzee who was passed away.
I'm going to defend KOT. I will.
Kenyans are mocking our second president. They're telling him, what have they been saying on Twitter today? Moi go to hell, for example.
Okay, no, true. Some of those things, that's very disrespectful. I will. I can concede on that point.
And they would do well to remember that the Bible tells us, honor your father. honor your father and mother that you may live long in the land. It doesn't say honor your perfect father.
Yes.
It doesn't say honor your father who's great and benevolent. It says honor your father despite his flaws, despite his contradictions.
Yes.
Right? And Abraham Lincoln also told us, nations that do not honor their heroes will receive no honor amongst nations, or they will, they will not long endure.
I don't think this fellow's chaotic.
And if we get to that slippery slope of disparaging our founding fathers and disrespecting them,
that's true.
Then that'll be a shame for this country.
Yeah, true.
I agree.
I think the most important thing in this moment is, of course, to think about balance, right?
Yeah.
Yes, we can consider the flaws, but we also need to consider the great things that he did for the country that we cannot forget.
And the sacrifices that he made.
That is true.
Yeah. So I think we toss the nation, toss the standard.
Seems
and
like
you don't know how to toss the newspaper very well, do you?
you
give
need
it
a
a
little
star.
bit more.
Celeste.
Should we be tossing for a man who has actually died?
Okay, we can put them in the parking bay and assign the winning cartoon to the star. All right.
I apologize for tossing.
All right, fantastic.
All right. And so, what is our final thought?
And now, our final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter Godwin Woodson.
Yeah. So as we continue looking into Black History Month, but we're going to have this as Black History Week, we're going to look at The Miseducation of the Negro, written by Dr. Carter G. Woodson in 1933. So quite surprisingly, this book actually started out as part of his dissertation, his PhD thesis, when he was at the University of Harvard.
Yeah.
And he was looking into the education system for African Americans, trying to understand how it impacts their day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
So Dr. Woodson was born in 1875 and was a Black American historian, author, journalist, and the founder of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History.
Yeah.
So he was actually one of the first scholars to study African American history, and he was later the founder of the Journal of Negro History, which still exists today, 104 years later, which actually earned him the title, the Father of Black History.
Yeah.
But I think we should qualify it as being the father of Black American history.
Yes.
So in 1926, he founded the celebration of Negro History Week, which today we know to be Black History Month, and it's celebrated in February, which we're looking at this week.
Yeah.
So the major thesis in this book is that the blacks of his day, which was in the late 1800s to the early 1900s, were being culturally indoctrinated rather than being taught.
Yes.
So this conditioning, he suggested, caused blacks to become dependent and seek out inferior positions in society. So the most crucial element of this concept of miseducation focuses on the education system's failure to present Negro history in school, and the unfortunate knowledge that was and is still today the lack of literature and the history of Black history. And why? It's precisely because Black history books, or rather most history books, gave little to no space for the Black man's presence in history. And so they were generally depicted in menial or subordinate roles that were more or less subhuman. And so moreover, and still relevant today, is a neglect of Afro history and the distortion of facts concerning Negroes. And I think that applies both in the United States and in Africa. And this has deprived the Black child, he says, and his race in general, of the heritage and left a sense of nothingness and nobodiness. So miseducation criticizes the education system and explains the vicious cycle that results from having this miseducated individual graduate from the education system and then produce and teach more miseducated people. So you have this vicious cycle that goes on and on. And so the larger lesson of this book is an emphasis on the importance of knowing the history and origins of the Black people, and that the education system is more than just a transfer between teacher and student, but should teach students to be critical and to ask about their history and ask those hard questions about where we came from.
That's fantastic.
It is. It's a really interesting book.
You know, ignorance begets ignorance.
Oh yes.
Miseducation begets miseducation.
Yes.
And you've got to break that vicious cycle.
You do, yeah. And I think he's beginning to help people understand how to do that.
Oh yes. You know, my takeaway from this book, guys, was what he calls the seed of trouble. And the seed of trouble is the highly educated Negro. And the highly educated Negro, in a way, because he was highly educated and he had mixed with symbols of white rule, he had an attitude of contempt towards himself and towards his own. And he was actually taught to love other cultures, the Jewish culture, for example. He was taught to love Hebrew. He was taught to love the Greek. He was taught to love Latins. And that is because he despised his own African heritage. And he goes on to say that even in Negro schools, right, the inferiority of the Negro was drilled into him in almost every sphere. Now, I want to ask guys to even bring that to Africa, and even here in Kenya. I did class 1 to class, I finished KCP and then I moved on our system. But in all the books that I read, geographical books that I read, I was told that that Vasco da Gama discovered Malindi, and some fellow called John Sepek, I don't know what his name is, he discovered the source of the Nile, and like there were no natives living there.
Exactly, that there was no one there when they came to find it.
Yes, and I also want to go a little bit crazy. Jay-Z says that the only Christopher he acknowledges is Wallace. And that's because, and Wallace is Christopher Wallace, notorious B.I.G. Now, the reason he says that is because they say that the person who discovered America was Christopher Columbus. And it's absolute rubbish. You know, and those are the symbols that the educated Negro read and actually believed in them. And the white man was so comfortable in that, it's because he knew he had already overwhelmed the Negro. And I want to read something that Woodson says here. And allow me to read it to our viewers. He says, the highly educated Negro becomes pessimistic and usually develops into a chronic fault finder or a complainant at the bar of public opinion. Often, when he sees that the fault lies at the door of the white oppressor, whom he is afraid of to attack, he turns upon the pioneering Negro who is at work doing the best he can to extricate himself from the uncomfortable predicament. What happens when the very learned of this society go back to their village? They say that is a peasant, and therefore they will not amount to anything, all right? But that is because they have found enlightenment in the name of education. Now, what he says is the right thing to do is use that which you have learned in the best schools, go back and help percolate it to where it matters most.
Absolutely. It's a great book, very enlightening, and the shocking thing is that this was the reality in the time that he wrote in the 1930s. But it's still much of reality here in Africa, on the continent. You know, we still have a lot of ignorance that we've got to get rid of. And what he's saying in this book, in part, is that the miseducation therefore leads to the Negro having and living a suboptimal life when it comes to the world of work, business, pursuits and ambitions. The ambitions are very limited. So he says, for example, in that time, Negroes knew about farming, but they didn't know about scientific methods. They didn't know about ways in which they could increase the yield of their products and so on and so forth, which is still the reality in Africa today. We're still a rain-fed agricultural economy at large. You know, not even relying so much on the scientific methods of improving our systems and so on and so forth. So he says the Negro is at a disadvantage in society. He's only given sufficient knowledge for him to get by, to survive, rather than to really thrive, right? So he says, for example, at that time, when a Negro student works his way through college by polishing shoes, he does not think of making a special study of the science underlying the production and distribution of leather and its products. And someday, you know, he could be an innovator in the space of leather, but he doesn't think about that. Another example, when a Negro is sent to become a mechanic at a college, he doesn't aspire to learn about mechanical engineering. So there's two things there. On the one hand, the Negro is definitely oppressed by the system. And we also experienced this in this country during the colonial era. The Kenyans, indigenous Kenyans, were not allowed to be educated beyond a certain level. So yes, you could be a technician, but you couldn't be a mechanical engineer. So you couldn't aspire to be the one who sits at the table and thinks about innovations and inventions. And so he's basically saying that the Negro has to kind of break out of that mold and really see himself as a as an equal to the Caucasian.
Absolutely.
And lastly, Negroes didn't factor in succession into their businesses.
That's a big one.
So when they started businesses, first of all, they didn't want to cooperate with fellow Negroes. They wanted to go it alone, make it alone.
Crabs in a barrel, man.
Right? Yeah. Which is the same thing we have in Africa, amongst ourselves, in our ethnic groups, even our brothers. We don't want to collaborate, put our farms together so that we put our dairy cattle together and have, you know, better management methods. No, we want to go it alone.
And the irony of that is we talk about Ubuntu, we talk about community, yet we're the last people to want to share what we have. It's
precisely. So two things that he faulted the Negroes for. This
failure of succession.
Lack of, failure of succession being the second thing. And the first thing, lack of cooperating. So on succession, he says, the Negro also didn't put into place good succession mechanisms. So when he died, the business died with him. That sounds really familiar to
most definitely.
And it's really a shame.
So as you're saying, on one hand, it's really sad that, you know, this is written in 1933 and we're still seeing so many of these things still existing. But on the other hand, I think it could be inspirational, right? I think there's so many ways for us to continue to find out what our own history is and find ways to figure out those succession issues, how to be great, how to be educated, how to share our education with our brothers and sisters. It can be inspirational at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Most definitely.
Beautiful. So on a day that we had a winning headline from the Daily Nation. And a winning cartoon from Celeste in the Star. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are also on your TV screens. Find us on Pang, Free to Air, Go TV, and Star Times. Have a good evening.